Today's RadResponder Nationwide Drill National Background Week 2021 pre-drill webinar will cover all of the skills necessary to be successful during the nationwide drill. National Background Week 2021 is a little different than our previous RadResponder Nationwide drills. This drill can be as basic or as in-depth as you want it to be, and the drill guidance varies depending on if you participated in National Background Week 2019 or if this is your first National Background Week. In order to meet the goal of this drill, the only requirements are that you create an event, enter radiological surveys in a designated area or region that you define, and mark those readings as being background. Associating readings with sampling locations for historical records, adjusting severity levels, and assessing data are all optional, but they are strongly recommended. We'll go over a high-level summary of the skills that you'll need for the nationwide drill. Those required skills are to create an event, enter data and use the is background feature, create a facility and add sampling locations, and understand measurement quality objectives, which will be presented by FRMAC later in this presentation. The optional and recommended skills that we will cover today include adjusting and understanding severity thresholds and assessing data. For more in-depth walkthroughs of all of these features that we're going over today, you can access our job aids and user guides in our resource library. So to start, we'll go over the required skills, beginning with creating an event. In order to do this, you must have at least the event creator role in your organization. Once you're logged into RadResponder, there are two ways to create an event. You can click the Create button from the main homepage in that green Events tile. Or from the upper ribbon, you can click that down arrow next to the event space and click Create Event. Whichever way you choose will bring you to this event creation form here. All the fields that you need to fill out are required, indicated by a red asterisk. We will be giving you guidance for different name suggestions and the different criteria for the event, but we'll just go over a few of those now. And so we do have a suggested naming convention, which will comprise of either your organization's name or your area of survey, and then National Background Week 2021. So my example here is Southern California National Background Week 2021. For type, we highly suggest you choose routine monitoring. Sharing mode, this will be dependent on how you want to partner with any organizations with this event. So if you are partnering with other organizations, you may want to choose partners only. Or if you're working as just your own organization, you may want to make it organization only. But again, this will be up to you. As you scroll down, you'll see some different checkbox options, and they all have a green question box next to it. And you can hover over these green question box at any time for more information, but I do recommend that you check the box for routine for your nationwide drill event because it keeps your event open even if no data is entered into it within 30 days, so you can continue to leverage this event for continuous background measurements even after the duration of this drill. It's also optional but recommended that you share your event with FRMAC, which is the Federal Radiological Monitoring and Assessment Center. If you opt to share your event with FRMAC, they'll be able to assess and review your data. And again, you can always hover over that green question mark for more information. And when you do check that Share with FRMAC box, you'll receive a little message here saying that by sharing with FRMAC, FRMAC organizations will not be manageable by event managers. If you only want a specific FRMAC organization, it must be added manually. Once you enter the location and all other necessary fields and any optional fields that you would like, you'll click Save Changes to your event, and your event is now created. The next required skill to participate in the nationwide drill is to actually go ahead and collect that background data. In order to collect data in RadResponder, you must have at least the data collector role. When collecting data, you can label readings as background for all data types, either via the web or the mobile application. So right here, I'm showing a field survey form, both on the mobile app on the left and on the website on the right. And so when you collect background readings, you can check that background field to indicate that the reading you are taking are background. So why is this important, or why should you leverage this toggle or checkbox? By marking your readings as background, you can easily sort and filter to find background data at the event level, and this can help inform your background range, and you can adjust your severity thresholds if you would like. From your data tables, in order to see which readings are marked as background, you're going to want to make sure that you select the column. So you'll click that Choose Visible Columns option, and then select the background column that I have highlighted in red here. Once that column is enabled and you can see it in your data table, you can then sort so you can see readings marked yes or marked no. And you can also apply a background filter to only see data that is marked as being background by the filter I have highlighted in pink. Another highly recommended part of this drill is to create a facility and add sampling locations. And so you must have either the event manager or event creator role in order to leverage this functionality. Now, facilities and sampling locations are imperative to this drill for a variety of different reasons, but the main reason here is that if you associate your data with sampling locations, you are then able to see a historical record of data taken at that location. So there's no other way in RadResponder for you to see a record of all the readings taken at a single location over time across a variety of events. So again, you can only leverage this comparison feature by using the sampling location mode when collecting your data. And here's an example of what it looks like when you're viewing all readings taken at a single sampling location. From the bottom row here, that this reading was taken in April of 2019 of 50 counts per minute. And then I can also see something taken in January of 2021 with the value of 45 counts per minute. So again, this is all through the sampling location details page, and as many readings are taken with the sampling location, they'll all be listed in this table, and this will allow me to view any anomalies, any trends, any discrepancies at that particular data location. So if you don't already have an organization facility with sampling locations and indicating where you want to take your readings for this drill, we highly recommend that you create your facility at the organization level so you can utilize the bulk sampling locations import option. From your organization space, you're going to select the facilities option on the left-hand menu. And from that organization's facility page, you're going to click Add Facility to be brought to this Add Facility creation form on the right. You'll fill out all of the required information marked with a red asterisk and any optional fields that you would like. And please note that the facility term, it doesn't have to be an actual building or location. So it can serve as the parent location in order to leverage the sampling locations feature for this drill. All sampling locations do have to be associated with a facility, and so that's what we're creating here is just, again, that parent location for all of my sampling locations. In this example here, I'm naming the facility Nebraska background locations, and I'm selecting just an arbitrary facility location, since again, this is not an actual building. And I will be using this location to house my sampling locations, which is where I'm actually going to go out and collect my data. I'll fill out, again, all of those required fields and any optional fields that I would like, and I'll click Save Changes. Once I click Save Changes, I'll be brought to my facility details page where I can add my sampling locations. From the top of my facility details page, I will click that Import Sampling Locations button to be brought to the sampling location import page. From here, I'll click the Download Template File with instructions to fill out that spreadsheet with all of my sampling locations. Fill out that spreadsheet with the name of your sampling location, the lat and long, as many as you would like. You'll save that file, upload it into RadResponder via the sampling location import, and they'll be uploaded, and you can now see all of your sampling locations in your facility details page at the bottom screenshot here. So now your facility is created, you've added all of your sampling locations. You can now head back over to your background week event. You'll expand that configuration menu on the left-hand side and you'll open up facilities. This is where you're going to add that organization side facility onto the event. You're going to click Add Facility at the top. And again, you must have the event manager role in order to do this. You have two options to create a facility. You can either create new or select from existing. And you're going to choose select from existing because you just created that facility with all of your sampling locations. What you'll do is you'll search for the name of your facility in the select existing facility field. And then you just have a few more things to fill out before you're able to add it to your event. You'll need to select your facility status, and we just recommend that you select live. And then you can define the hours of operation if you would like, or you can just leave them as is and click Save Changes to add the facility to the event. Now my facility and all of my sampling locations are now on my event, and I can now use them as the location for my background readings. Next, we'll go over some optional skills that, again, are not required in order to be successful during this National Background Week, but they are things that you may want to leverage if you want to get some more RadResponder practice out of the drill. The first topic is severity thresholds. So you must have the event manager role to edit or create severity thresholds. Severity thresholds are the levels that are assigned to each data point based on the survey threshold set at the event level. So these levels can be adjusted. The severity levels are then given a color to represent the severity on the event map. So again, these are just the ranges of readings that represent background, low, medium, high, or very high. And then a color is designated to points that fall within those ranges on the event map, which you can see in the screenshot here. As a note, the background feature is defined by the user when taking a reading. So manually recording a reading as background does not override the severity level based on the threshold set at the event level. By marking your surveys as being background, you can then use those readings to inform where your area's typical background readings are, and you can then adjust those severity levels accordingly. So I can see here, even though the severity level for these top two readings fall within the background range, the first one, the 11.54 micro-R per hour, was not marked as background, while the 5.76 micro-R per hour was. So you can use this to help inform what you want your severity threshold to be. You can pretty much do whatever you'd like with this, but do know that the background feature is something that is user-defined, not system-defined. Like we showed you a little earlier, you can turn on that background filter, and then you can sort by value to see your range of background here. If you do look at your background readings and you do feel it appropriate to adjust your severity thresholds, you'll expand the configuration tab on the left-hand side of your event space and click Thresholds. Threshold sets can be set for a variety of different data types, so you'll want to click that blue magnifying glass icon next to the data type you wish to adjust. So most of you will be using the field surveys for your background measurements, and so I'm going to click the blue magnifying glass next to the default field survey threshold set. I'll click Edit, and once I'm in the Edit page, I can update the general information, including the threshold label names. So by default, they're labeled as background, low, medium, high, or very high. But again, you can choose to customize this to meet your organization's needs. You'll scroll down and you'll be presented with all of your thresholds that are currently assigned or defined. From here, you can add, edit, or remove any threshold sets for the various measurement types and units. If you wish to add a threshold, so a unit in a measurement type that is not already on this list, you will click Add Threshold. You can filter by the measurement type, and then you'll just add the unit in question here and click Continue for it to be added. The new units will be highlighted in green so you can easily identify which ones need to be defined. And you can also just edit the values and limits of the existing thresholds. In this page here, you'll see that background, low, medium, and high are the only ranges that you can define because you're identifying the upper limits. The very high or the red severity level is the highest, so anything greater than the upper limit for the high will be defined as very high, so that's why that one is not showing up on this list. Once you're done editing the upper limits for each range or each threshold range, you'll click Save Changes, and you'll be able to see the actual range in your list here. So this means that if I enter a 3.6 milli-R per hour, This would translate to be a medium severity threshold because 3.6 falls in the medium range of 2 to 5. The next feature I want to cover is assessing data. So again, this is not required, but it is highly recommended that you assess your background data, and you must have the data assessor role in order to do so. The assessment functionality in RadResponder was overhauled at the end of 2020, and here's a list of things that have changed. The assessment status language was approve, reject, or pending, and now in order to accommodate for multi-levels of assessment, it's now passed review, failed review, under review, or pending review. Previously, event permissions, if anyone had the data assessor role, you could assess any data point on an event that you were on. Now, only the owning organization's personnel or the selected delegate organization's personnel with the data assessor role can assess the data. And so I'll show you how you can identify another organization as a delegate so they can assess your organization's data. The third change was assessment policies. So before this implementation, we had a system-wide single-step policy for all data in all organizations, and there was no customization. Now each organization can identify custom assessment policies that are multi-step or multi-layer, and they can identify different assessment practices per data type. If you opted to share your event with FRMAC, either by creating your event or adding them afterwards, or any other event partner, and you want them to be able to assess your event data, you need to give them, so whether again that be FRMAC or another event partner, explicit permission to do so. So under the configuration tab in the event space, you'll select assessment delegates. And here is where you will see all of the event partners on your event. You need to locate your organization. So mine is Chainbridge Technologies that entered the data, and click Manage. And I need to then assign data assessment rights to other organizations by selecting them in the Delegate Organizations box. Highlighted in red here, it says choose other organizations that can assess data points owned by Chainbridge Technologies. So I'll enter as many delegate organizations as I would like and click Save Changes. Now, under the Delegates column, FRMAC or any other organization partner that I choose can assess and review the data that my organization collected. This is a very high-level overview of the changes that went into place for this assessment capability. And so if you are interested on creating those custom assessment policies that I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend you check out our special feature webinar on multi-layer data assessment. So again, if you need custom assessment policies, you'll need to access those documents in the resource library or watch the video recording. But we'll just talk about the default policy that every organization has, that global assessment policy, and it's named the Default System Assessment Policy. And so this is a simple step policy that mirrors the functionality in RadResponder prior to the multi-layer assessment changes. The only change here is that you'll have a few more options to mark your data. So if you are using the default system assessment policy, which again is the global policy, so if you did not create a multi-layer assessment policy or a custom policy, this is the policy that every organization will have. You'll have the following options highlighted in pink instead of the old approve and reject buttons. So for the assessment steps, I can choose under review or under review with comment to add a comment, passed review with comment, and failed review with comment. That latest assessment status column will then show you what your current status of your reading is, and you can always change that status if you do have that data assessor role. I'm now going to hand it over to Jeff Chapman, and he is going to go over the FRMAC guidance for background readings.
Jeff Chapman, I am a detailee, a technical advisor to NA84 Consequence Management, working for John Crapo, representing the FRMAC. I am on loan up here from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and I've been in the DOE system for about 40 years now. And my specialty is conducting measurements. I used to teach the ORISE course, the 5-week course for radiation measurements, handhelds in particular. So I thought I'd offer some guidance on behalf of the FRMAC on how to actually think about acquiring these background measurements. And in addition to what Christine has so eloquently informed you of, is how to use RadResponder to get your data into it. I'm going to focus on the data quality. Obviously, I've made enough measurements all suited up in my day with a respirator, come back and try to make sense of what I just did for the entire day, and come to find out I've had a detector problem or I didn't record something properly. And so the data that I collected for that day is pretty much null and void, and I got to go out and do it the next day. And that's what we want to say here in data quality, is that, which is obvious, that this is a great time to look at your program, look at your instruments, and make some evaluation against your capability on the application of these instruments for making a background. And I'm going to get into some of the details on that here. So for example, the first thing you're going to want to do, and you've probably got procedures, hopefully you've got procedures to govern this, is you want to evaluate, is my instrument that I'm selecting for that day, is it fit for purpose? Does it have a calibration sticker or some way of notating that, yes, it's been calibrated within some period of time that, you know, is actually going to be representative of the type of radiation that I'm going to measure? Have I done a source check on it? What is my source check protocol before using that instrument? And do I have, you know, whatever I need to maintain and repair that instrument, whether it's a cable, extra mica in windows, if you're using an alpha detector, which, by the way, nobody used an alpha detector last year, which, okay, that's one thing. But do I have extra in windows, things, Mylar in windows? Do I have sufficient batteries? Are my batteries charged, and will it hold a charge? So some of the fundamental questions about your maintenance and repair program you ought to be thinking about before you set out and make a background measurement. You know, are you aware of any environmental effects with that specific instrument? Does it respond the same? Is the background the same when it's raining, when it's humid, when it is day or night, diurnal effects? But essentially, are you aware, how familiar are you with your instrument that you're selecting for the background as a function of environmental effects? Because you know, in my experience, for example, you'll get out to the field and you'll discover that the cable that you're using is, if you bend it and clearly the connector is not good, then maybe you've got a problem. And then I put this last bullet on here because I've been using a little bit, and maybe some of you have as well, some of the new Bluetooth enabled systems from Ludlam, for example. I've used the Lumic software that they've got on their system that then communicates with RadResponder. So is your Bluetooth communications working, and does it adequately talk to RadResponder? So those are a few ideas I put up just from good practices. I'm sure most of you already know this and should be built into your procedure. And what may not be built into your procedure explicitly is, you know, whether you're training, whether the measurement specialist who's going to take the background measurement themselves is trained in the use of that instrument, and whether it's a direct reading exposure rate measurements or a direct reading count rate measurement, or you're using that pancake GM, if you will, to make a contamination measurement by smearing the surface and measuring the surface contamination in the field. There's a number of different ways to do this, but you know, I'm focused here on is the person making the measurement trained and qualified to actually use that piece of equipment. And then, of course, the bugaboo that so many of us get tangled up with: am I applying my unit conversions properly, whether it's count rate to DPM or DPM per 100 square centimeters, and how do you interpret that? And the conflicts, particularly for the users of an instrument that it's just an occasional use. And we've had several discussions on a couple committees I'm on on how to deal with this interpretation and doing unit conversions, again, particularly for folks who just aren't using it's not their first job, let's say, but it's way down the list. They might use that instrument once a year. And so we're trying to get RadResponder developed and implemented such that none of this is confusing to people. And I think we've still got a ways to go, but you want to make sure in your training program, of course, that people understand, your trained folks know how to convert and interpret these readings. And then, of course, as I say, the applicable procedures are in hand, and you understand where the background measurement fits into your specific procedures. And there's a little note over here in the end, someone, it might be your boss, it might be the FRMAC, someone is going to assess your data and evaluate, can I use this data? Is it any good to us? And speaking from the FRMAC, I can tell you when you're getting all this data coming in and you've got different notation for different detectors, and we know what those different detectors are generally, we may not know the specifics of them, it's a tough go to sort through thousands and thousands of data points and evaluate, is this data good enough to use? And we know that in the first 24 hours, 48 hours of an event, that is this most important step in setting up the consequence management response. So please pay particular attention to this, and we're going to be learning along with you and helping you understand how we can do this any better. So for this year I went back to the 2019 drill background data entry sheets that Christine had sent me. And what I found is for these data entries that the type of instrument, the top two values were gamma and beta gamma. Severity level, background, and there was an unable to calculate in several cases, and I'm not sure where that came from, but just okay, all right. Values ranged as you would expect. There was I didn't see any strange background readings that were notated one way or the other that would lead me to believe that the background measurements were not performed correctly. On the units, the typical units were, and of course we've changed these, and people say these things differently, as you know, in the field. Micro R per hour, MR per hour, CPM, and micro rem per hour were the four most used units. The orientation was empty mostly. When it was not empty, it was in the down position, and if I remember correctly, that was from the RadEye, the Everline RadEye. The height had a number of units and heights. Most frequent was the 1 meter. And then we had a lot of 3 foots and several 2 foots. And the unit there is foot, so it doesn't carry over to feet if you enter in a number of greater than 1. Window open, closed. We had most of them were empty, and then the closed in some cases was entered. So I would presume. And I've got a couple comments to make on that later on, but I would presume that we'd be very interested in both an open measurement and a closed window measurement. Meter, I've got the meters and the probes on the next slide, and then the efficiency. And I will say that in like 99% of the cases, no one had entered an efficiency. In the case of a pancake GM or an efficiency source, for any of the instruments, and then surface area and surface area units. So those were mostly left blank. I think that some of those, particularly if you're using a pancake GM for your background readings, that you'd want to go ahead and enter in an efficiency source, and a surface area. Even if it's not your common source, I think it'd be interesting for us to look at the end of that week as to what people are using. And to that extent, I'm going to go to the next slide. There were 710 entries in the data set that Christine had sent me. And this is these are the most common meters and probes that were used. Obviously, the The NRC, the ADM 300 doesn't have a probe. The Thermoscientific PRD ER doesn't have a probe. The PM5, notice that somebody's using the Polymaster. So that was kind of a surprise to me, the PM5. The Bicron Q2 I see, of course, no probe. And then, of course, you see the hot dog probe from Ludlam. And I believe, yeah, the 44-9 is a pancake probe from Ludlam. The Canberra Q2 Ultra Radiac, Thermoscientific Radii, Canberra Millirad 213, Thermo Radii, and then following up again with the 2241 with the 44-2 Ludlam probe. So with a couple things that strike me, people enter these meters and probes in different ways. So, you know, I think my recommendations going forward into the future, we're going to try to firm up on just what you can enter and how you enter it, and we're going to work on that. But just, I thought it'd be interesting to you to see, because the question often comes up, what instruments were used? So these were the instruments used. All right, next screen. So the human error element can come in here in many ways. And did I enter the date and time correctly? Latitude and longitude, radiation type matches the instrument type. The meter and the probe are specified and specified correctly with enough detail that as an assessor, as someone sitting on a home team could look at and say, yeah, this, you know, this, whoever entered this data, it's consistent. They've been doing this a while, because, you know, when you're sitting in a black box somewhere looking at data, this is all you've got. And I don't know who it was, or I don't know what their training records were. It's just, I've got this measurement data. Does it look good? Is the measurement value in the unit proper? Was a pancake GM measurement reported in CPM, or was it reported in micro-R per hour? I've got a couple comments on that coming up. And then, of course, this measurement height issue is always an issue. How do, you know, I can't tell. I don't know that someone's made a measurement at 1 meter. Got some ideas on how to possibly solve that in the future. But at the moment, did you enter the measurement height properly? And does it make sense? And in the case of an alpha, beta direct measurement of the surface, our requirement is, you see there in red, that it be at 2 inches. And that's just kind of the convention. That's in the Marsom manual. That is in every manual that I know exists having to do with conducting a surface contamination measurement with a you know, zinc sulfide scintillator or a pancake GM detector. So that's there's a lot of places that a human error can be made, and we recognize that that is the case. And that's why this background drill is so important, just to get you familiar with getting the data that you're taking out there in the field into the system and getting it in there correctly. Next screen, please. So data quality at time 0 there. And Christine, I know you already mentioned this, but and I did notice that there's been some changes. So I hope you went through this before. Looks like you did. Yep. So basically, you're going to either accept, reject, under review, or the data is going to be pending. And I'm going to accept it at different levels. For example, if it's a qualitative, if it's just for a qualitative measurement, and you don't have the information, that is the efficiency, then a count per minute is fine. If it's just for qualitative information, I'm going to look for unusual heights, and you know, if it's an unusual height, that's fine. If it's, again, for qualitative information, if I'm going to use it for more quantitative use, then I'm going to start paying a lot more attention to, you know, do I have the efficiency? Do I have a reliable height? Do I have an open window or closed window measurement? Do I have a beta contamination situation? Is it a strontium 90, yttrium 90 release where I really, and that's all it is, and I just need that open window and measurement versus the closed window measurement? Very, very important. But when it's qualitative, I can live with a lot of things as long as it's qualitative. And then, if I'm using that data to do model validation and refinement, I'm going to be looking for consistency in that exposure rate. And if I'm going to feed that result of that measurement back into some NARAC model or make an evaluation as to whether it's completely different from something that we've modeled in the past for refining that model, then I'm going to make sure that data is as reliable and precise and accurate as I possibly can before using it. Okay, next screen. I think this is the other. Yeah, this is the this is the Jeff Chapman other objectives of the drill. So, I mean, some of you out there on this call are probably experts and probably could answer every single bullet on here and say, yeah, this is great. I know exactly what my region has in terms of background variability as a function of location. I know where my quarries are. I know where my granite hot tops are. I know where my Fiesta wear is. I know, if I go over to this area that my background is higher. Some of you may even have measured, which is kind of fun to do, increased radon levels in certain areas, or measured HEPA filtration areas and noticed the background going up, or noticed where there's an X-ray machine or a LINAC in your area where the background levels are higher. So it's really a lot of fun to get a really cool grip on what your background is as a function of location in your geographical area. Background variability as a function of height above the surface essentially is the same, is similar. I will note that you can be up against the granite wall and you can take that measurement, height measurement, and it stays steady. There's no difference in it. So be aware of surfaces that aren't horizontal as well, and you can play around with that and note that in RadResponder. You'll notice perhaps background variability as a function of time and environmental conditions. You'll identify elevated background areas from norm, T-norm, primordial radionuclides, operation of X-ray machines. Also, there is a report that we published, it must have been about 15 years ago, on variability of measurements between instruments and also between instrument technicians and users. And which makes it quite interesting, and that's kind of, by the way, factored into some of the MARSIM surveys. Let's see, identify operability issues with your instrumentation, a great time to do that. I think I mentioned that earlier. Also, I probably should really have bolded this, co-located measurements. If you are interested, especially when you get a region with elevated background, it's always informative to take a co-located measurement. That is, okay, I've got a high, looks like a high background area here from my sodium iodide Bicron or a plastic scintillation detector Bicron instrument. Let's see what the alpha beta measurements are as well. Let's see if it's different with an open window and a closed window ion chamber. It's kind of interesting to study those, and we can actually use that data as well to try to correlate what's going on with the deposition versus the exposure rate. Also tracking repeated measurements at the same location over time and looking at that variability. I think, yeah, closed window, open window measurements. If you make an open window measurements, there's some good lookup tables for looking at airborne concentrations of radionuclides, particularly when you make an open measurement as a function of height above the surface, particularly into the breathing zone. And then also the third to last bullet there. We used to use this rule a lot when we didn't have an ion chamber, and I'm just mentioning this not to confuse anyone, but just to make it informative. And that is with a pancake GM detector. If you look at the specification sheet on there, if you multiply the count rate by 3,300, if it's in counts per minute, multiply that by 3,300, or excuse me, the exposure rate, the dose rate, is equal to the count rate divided by 3,300 counts per minute per MR per hour. So nice handy conversion. I don't want to say anything more than that right now, but for those of you who are aware of this, it's really kind of nice to have that in your hip pocket. And you can always call me if you want further information on that. Also, on this background drill, familiarity with multi-probe instruments. It's coming into play now, where you simply have a count rate meter or scalar timer, and then you attach different instruments to it. So the background drill will help you refamiliarize yourself with these multi-probe instruments and understand how to change the probe dial, change the high voltage if you have to change it, or whether it's high sensing, auto sensing or not. And then last year we had no neutron measurements, but hey, nobody knows whether there could be a plutonium, an ambi source, a PUBI source. Who knows what type of source could be involved in an accident that would result in neutron exposure. So if you have neutron instruments, why not make them part of the drill? Again, just to reinforce your familiarity with the instrument, to get you to use the instrument and look at your program for using that instrument, and then, of course, entering the data into RadResponder. And then a few references.
So just to wrap things up, our drill guidance is separated into two separate documents. So one document is for previous participants who took part in 2019 National Background Week, and the other one is for first-time participants who have not participated in a RadResponder Background Week before. These documents are just guidance. So if your organization wants to leverage different features, or if you have a different goal, implement them. This drill is to help you. We're just sort of here to be that support. So you can choose to implement policies and procedures that best meet your organization's goals and objectives. We encourage you to virtually collaborate with your organization for COVID-19 safety measures, as this drill is intended to be completed individually and remotely. Again, we want you to comply with all social distancing safety measures, and if you are out collecting background readings, of course, just stay at least 6 feet apart from your fellow colleagues. We have a folder in the RadResponder resource library, and this folder will have all of the resources pertaining to the drill, including a copy of the pre-drill webinar slides, drill guidance materials, the one-pager. Again, everything will be able to be found in this one folder.